Hi, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talks, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. Today we're going to be talking about the depth and complexity icon of multiple perspectives. So the idea of multiple perspectives are looking at things from multiple angles, different points of view, to try to gain a better understanding. So let's demonstrate this for a second. So here is a glass of water. How would you describe this? So some of you may see this as a glass that is half full, and some of you may see this as a glass that is half empty. Which one is correct? You're actually both correct. It is definitely half full. It is definitely half empty. So neither one is incorrect, but they see it in different ways. And this is what happens with perspective. You may be looking at the exact same thing, and you might see it very differently. I'll give you a couple more examples of this. So take a look at this picture that you see right here. So what do you see in this picture? So some of you might see a young woman with her face turned away, her back to into the perspective. But if you look at it again, you also might see an old woman. You see her nose right here, and her smile, and her chin, and how her hair is covering her eyes. Again, neither one is incorrect. But what might be really interesting is that you may have seen the young woman first, and that's what you saw. But once I pointed it out, couldn't you start to see the old woman? And that's what the lesson of multiple perspectives is that you have your perspective and you see things a certain way. But if someone else sees it a certain way and they point this out to you, you might see more of the picture, or you might see it differently. So some questions that you want to consider when it comes to multiple perspectives. One is, how do different people view the topic? So when you're looking at a topic, whether it be a controversial topic or what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, you're going to get different points of view. And you need to understand how they see it, and probably more importantly, why they see it that way. So, for example, if we're taking a look at the idea of the death penalty, there are some people that agree that the death penalty is just. Someone killed someone, and so it's just that they are being killed as well. Other people are vehemently opposed to the death penalty, and they're going to see it as this person has rights. We shouldn't kill anyone. Two wrongs don't make a right. These are very difficult perspectives because they're diametrically opposed to one another. But to be enlightened, you want to have an understanding of both of those perspectives. So you might agree that the death penalty is just, but you understand and acknowledge that the other perspective, that we shouldn't be executing people, you understand that. Doesn't mean you agree with it. Does not mean you agree with it. It means that you understand it. And by listening to multiple perspectives, you are going to be better informed on the situation and be able to make a more educated decision on what your perspective is going to be. The second question, what are the pros and cons of each viewpoint? So when someone takes a viewpoint or a perspective, what are their advantages of doing that? What is the disadvantages of doing that? And why do you think so? Sometimes the disadvantages might cause them to think a certain way, but once they get a better understanding that it's not a disadvantage necessarily, but it might be a pro, again, it might open up their eyes a little bit. It might make them more open-minded to considering other possibilities. The last one is, what ideas about the topic will different perspectives question? So this is the counter-argument. So if you see things a certain way, and you want to truly understand the other side, but you want to stay with your perspective, you feel very strongly about your perspective, then you want to be able to understand what are their arguments against that, And then what are your arguments against the counter arguments? And does that strengthen your stance on what your perspective is? Or does it weaken that? So what I'm going to have you do now is I'm going to have you watch this short video called The Blind Men and the Elephant. And hopefully this will give you a little bit more perspective.
There were 6 blind men who grew up in a village in India, and the community kept them safe and shared with them many stories. The men were curious about many of the stories they heard, but they were most curious about elephants. Based on the stories that each of them had heard, they argued about what elephants must be like. The community grew tired of these arguments and arranged for the men to visit the palace, where they were greeted by an old friend from their village who worked as a gardener on the palace grounds. Their friend led them to the courtyard. There stood an elephant. The blind men stepped forward to touch the creature that was the subject of so many arguments. The first blind man reached out and touched the side of the huge animal. An elephant is smooth and solid like a wall, he declared. It must be very powerful. The second blind man put his hand on the elephant's limb or trunk. An elephant is like a giant snake, he announced. The third blind man felt the elephant's pointed tusk. I was right, he decided. This creature is as sharp and deadly as a spear. The fourth blind man touched one of the elephant's 4 legs. What we have here, he said, is an extremely large cow. The fifth blind man felt the elephant's giant ear. I believe an elephant is like a huge fan, or maybe a magic carpet that can fly over mountains and treetops, he said. The sixth blind man gave a tug on the elephant's coarse tail. Why, this is nothing more than a piece of old rope. Dangerous indeed, he scoffed. The gardener led his friends to the shade of a tree. Sit here and rest for the long journey home, he said. I will bring you some water to drink. While they waited, the 6 blind men talked about the elephant. An elephant is like a wall, said the first blind man. Surely we can finally agree on that. A wall? An elephant is a giant snake, answered the second blind man. It's a spear, I tell you, insisted the third blind man. I'm certain it's a giant cow, said the fourth blind man. Magic carpet, there's no doubt, said the fifth blind man. Don't you see, pleaded the sixth blind man. Someone used a rope to trick us. Their argument continued, and their shouts grew louder and louder. Wall, snake, spear, cow, carpet, rope. Stop shouting, called a very angry voice. It was the Rajah, awakened from his nap by the noisy argument. How can each of you be so certain you are right? Asked the ruler. The 6 blind men considered the question, and then, knowing the Rajah to be a very wise man, they decided to say nothing at all. The elephant is a very large animal, said the Rajah kindly. Each man touched only one part. Perhaps if you put the parts together, you will see the truth. Now, let me finish my nap in peace.
And so, watching that very famous parable about the blind men and how they saw the elephant, you had 6 different men seeing the elephant all differently, based on where they came from, where they were touching it. So, if they had all touched the ear, then yes, maybe they might have agreed on what an elephant was. But because they were approaching it from their own perspective, they saw, or in this case, imagined, what it is that they were touching. And at the very end of this, the gentleman says, you have to put it all together to get the big picture. And that's how multiple perspectives work. When you take multiple perspectives and you consider all of them and you put them together, does it give you a better understanding of what it is that you're trying to learn about? They often say that there are 2 sides to every story. But the reality is, there is sometimes 3, 4, 5, however many people saw what went on. So someone may see the exact same thing, but might perceive it very differently. And that's why it's important to not jump to conclusions with your own perception, but to try to gain a better understanding of all the perspectives to give you a better idea of what truly happened.